gonna get started. I didn't realize it was 5:30 already. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. It's one of the most important days of the year. And the time is 5:30 p.m. And so can you please read the roll?
Comstock. Yes. Present.
I'm focused on the most important days.
Yeah.
Here. Crombie.
Here.
Drengler.
Here.
Jacobs.
Today, I'd like to be known as Mike Fitzjacobs.
Owens.
Here.
Rosas.
Oh, Rosas also.
Baker is all right, and we've got quorum.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Next on the agenda is the approval of the March 3rd, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And then any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those not in favor say nay. Okay, motion carries. Citizen appearance public comment. This is actually on the agenda for those of you that want to speak about something that is not on the agenda. This is your time. And I believe, let's see, we do have two people that would like to speak. One of them is Sunshine Anderson.
Back again. How are we doing? All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sunshine Anderson, and I live at 1442 Thoreau Drive. I come to you tonight frustrated and disappointed, but still holding a little bit of hope. To recap things from my perspective, I left my job and began sharing concerning information with you regarding the city as a workplace and the highly skilled staff lost as a result. I called on you to open a management operational audit of the city administrator's office, and I pointed you to how to pay for it. You met for nearly 3 hours and announced not an audit, but a strategic plan. I will admit, that one came out of left field for me. During the original referral for that conversation, council's intent was to offer help. That was the word I heard, to those who were affected. While a strategic plan could help the administrator's office get in line in future months, it completely misses accountability for the harm done. I'm sure we will see employer of choice again as a topic in this strategic plan, but I can tell you that without holding poor management to account, we'd be liars to make that claim. That was already a set goal, and it looks like we're not meeting it anymore. I became a historian partly because those who don't know history are often doomed to repeat it. We cannot afford repeats of the actions from the city administrator's office last fall. Half of you on council have now personally apologized to me for the way that I and other former employees were treated. I simply see a wrong in the world and was raised to call it out. People tend to run for office because they want to make a difference. This is a chance to do that. As you present the Women's History Month proclamation later this evening, think about the environment that this city has actually created for women and female-bodied people. Are we valuing those voices when they speak up, or are your actions saying you don't speak up because nothing will be done? The city's employee makeup is becoming less diverse year over year. It isn't just about what we say we care about, it's about the actions we take to support those people. As it stands, we've tolerated unacceptable behavior. And from my view, we have at least one major liability in the city administrator's office. Look at our bills that are rolling in from outside counsel for handling Dr. Daly's claims and settlement talks. Our in-house counsel, all due respect, dear Kathleen, is considered compromised due to the having supervised somebody who is named in that complaint, which is why we should absolutely bring in a third uncompromised party. If we only move forward with a strategic plan, we send the message that it's okay to create a toxic work environment. We can throw together a new plan and ignore the harm that was done. This workplace was born out of panic from an administration that has proved to not be able to handle referendum prep very well. I was a full-hearted yes vote. I am really struggling to remain there with this referendum. We need to get a move on addressing these issues because if the referendum fails, we're going to end up right back where we started. It's not too late. You can run both a strategic plan and an audit. You meet one more time before the referendum vote date. Send the message to voters that you are looking at all offices for savings, and all it takes tonight is a referral to continue that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have William Gruber.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council, residents, and unelected public servants. I am here tonight to talk about my experience living in Sun Prairie the past 5 years, but more notably the past
think
5
so.
months, or past 6 months.
Is the microphone on?
Is it? Can you hear me?
Is it green? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And my name is William Gruber. I live at 1442 Thoreau Drive. Picking up, I'm here to talk about my experience living in Sun Prairie for the past 5 years, but more notably the past 6 months. Before I dive into all the reasons why, in my personal opinion, the city's administrative leadership has failed their responsibilities to its staff and residents, I would like to bring up Merriam-Webster's definitions for a few words that may be relevant in future discussions. First one is craven, contemptuously lacking in courage or cowardly. Deceitful, having a tendency or disposition to deceive or give false impressions. Dishonest, misleading. Smarmy, revealing or marked by smug, ingratiating, or false earnestness. Those are all adjectives that came to the front of my mind on Wednesday, October 29th, 2025, after hearing the recording of a meeting that my wife, Sunshine Anderson, and their supervisor, Katie Scanlon, had with Aaron Oppenheimer, Sandy Zhang, and Rose Simon Silva, but with their department head, Kristen Grissom, noticeably absent. Anyone who has been paying attention to the public comments since that time already knows that during this meeting, a group of highly compensated members of city administration told museum staff that they had decided to preemptively cut $1 million from the 2027 city budget, which meant that the museum would need to cut their department budget / personal salaries by at least 20% without any support from their department head, just so that the administrator's office could, quote, appear to have listened to resident feedback on the survey. In addition to that, the city would certainly intend to close the museum outright in 2027 if the referendum fails this April. That was all stated dead face to my wife. While anyone with any amount of management experience or education can tell you what an embarrassing and unprofessional approach to the entire situation that was, tough conversations do have to occur in the workplace. This embarrassing lack of social grace and talent is obviously not the underlying reason of why we are still speaking out on our experience today. What those of you who have been paying attention still might not know is that during that meeting, the city administrator lied to both Sunshine and Katie about the employment status of their manager and director of Park, Recreation, and Forestry, Kristen Grissom, and specifically told museum staff to avoid attempting to try and make contact with Kristen despite the steaming pile of bull that had just been dropped on their plate, along with the fact that their department head and manager was also now gone. Museum staff were rug pulled and left up the river without a paddle by administration. Kristen Grissom was originally invited to the museum alongside Sunshine and Katie, but was not in attendance. Upon having the museum's future brought into question, Sunshine and Katie stated they needed to call Kristen to help process the news that they had just been given, only for Aaron Oppenheimer to ultimately state that Kristen was no longer with the city and would not be returning. This was a shocking news to Sunshine and Katie, and at that point, because they were at that point the only members of the Sun Prairie Parks and Recreation Department to know about the removal of their department head, because the city administrator's office had used the wrong address book for the notice that they sent out immediately prior to that meeting mentioning that. In fact, the address book they used contained only one current full-time employee for the city Parks and Recreation Department, and he happened to be in Mexico on vacation that weekend. That isn't to mention the multiple bungled communication attempts that followed and blatant non-apology by the city administrator when staff expressed the harm caused. So yes, craven, deceitful, smarmy, and most importantly of all, well documented. In addition to the disgraceful excuse for management on display, according to public record request number 31-2026, Kristen's separation date from the city was on October 31st, and her separation agreement was not signed until October 30th. Considering Aaron disclosed on the 29th that Kristen would no longer be returning, this information implies to me that Aaron is a liar, undeserving of both staff and public trust. While it is pathetic to see the leader of any organization push out talented employees in order to consolidate power and provide raises to cronies, it is especially pathetic when those leaders lack anything resembling talent or vision. Therefore, I'm now in the position of trying to decide whether to vote yes or no on the upcoming referendum. The progressive part of me understands that the fiscal realities of the situation, and up until last October, Sunshine and I both wouldn't have hesitated to vote yes. However, after witnessing the true colors and competence levels of the city administrator's office, it seems like we are not getting the level of talented and nuanced leadership that a growing community like Sun Prairie needs. And I suspect that the increased tax burden will simply go into paying for more employee turnover and severance lawsuits if not brought to heel. Now that we've looked at my past 6 months living in Sun Prairie, I will talk about my overall experience living here these past 5 years. Moving from the East Coast, I've experienced population booms that have occurred in both Loudoun County, Virginia.
Excuse me, William, are you almost done?
Getting there.
Okay.
And North Carolina's Research Triangle, and I can tell you that these periods of intense growth are the biggest tipping points for small communities to either stand up and differentiate themselves or be absorbed into as a suburb of the expanding cultural hub. The city of Madison shows no signs of slowing its growth anytime soon. Prior to Aaron's knee-jerk cuts and a series of what appeared to be deeply questionable resignations in 2025 from senior staff, the city of Sun Prairie has had a robust library system and media center, an energized and engaging Parks, Rec, and Forestry department, and a professionally run museum working to help differentiate itself from surrounding communities. Now it has a library that is overbuilt and understaffed, a freshly fractured forestry and parks and recreation departments whose prior leadership was unceremoniously rug pulled, and a beautiful, unstaffed downtown archival space in the place of the previously blossoming city museum. While I can't predict whether the referendum will pass or fail, I can accurately predict that Sunshine and I will not be the ones paying for the city's mistakes, regardless of the outcome. Like Georgia O'Keeffe, talented people will always be able to find greener pastures if pushed or disrespected, even if those greener pastures are in the middle of the fucking desert. Thank you.
Thank you, William. All right. So next we're moving on to new business. And under new business, I'm sorry. Council liaison committee member reports. Do we have any council liaison committee member reports up here? Mayor Stocker.
Yes, thank you. At the Sun Prairie Utility meeting this week, we have solidified a ribbon cutting and open house for May 5th from 3 to 5:30. So if you want to put that on your calendar, May 5th from 3 to 5:30.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Okay, so moving on, we will go under new business. Presentation of the current health insurance broker, request for proposal, status, and process. And I believe, Kathleen, you're going to be presenting that to us?
I am. Give me just a minute to get my screen shared.
Sure. And this is only a presentation only, and there's no action tonight.
That is correct, Madam President. All right, so on March 3rd at our last meeting, Alderperson Bill Baker had made a referral for a report on March 17th to request an update on the status of the health insurance broker, which included the anticipated deadline for posting, confirmation that it would include a review of all benefit structures, including health insurance, as well as identification of any legal or procurement considerations that would come into play. As a reminder, our current contract is with USI, which was formerly known as ABRC. That contract expires at the end of this year. So under our purchasing policy, we've got kind of 3 categories of purchases that are made, all of which require that you generally go out and get at least 2 quotes, but for a larger purchase, we require a formal bid process or an RFP process. In this case, given the volume of the contract, as well as the fact that this is a contract for a health insurance broker who advises us on our benefits purchase, which is one of our largest expenses outside of wages, we're recommending going forward with an RFP, which is a formally let process that's then evaluated by staff. So the RFP has been posted by our finance department. It went out on Friday afternoon. We posted it on the city website. We've got a standard page out there for anyone who's interested in bidding on a city contract that has links to these websites as well. It's on DemandStar, which is DemandStar, which is from the Wisconsin Association of Public Purchasers, as well as VendorNet, which is a state website that people can go to look for state or local government contracts that are being lent. We're recommending a 4-year term on this contract so that it better aligns with our health insurance contract renewals. Right now, our broker contract expires at the end of the year, and our contract with our legacy provider, GHC, expires at the end of this year. And it's kind of unusual timing to have a broker who's transitioning out make your benefits recommendation for the term of the next broker's contract. So we're recommending that 4-year shift so that going forward, a broker will be around for the transition of care if there is a change in benefits providers. As I stated, that contract is out. We're already receiving questions on it from some interested proposers. So questions need to be sent to us by this Friday, and then answers to questions will be posted by the following Friday. We have those posted on all the websites as well so that any proposer can go out there and everyone can see the answers to any question asked by a proposer so that everyone has a fair shake at making a good proposal. And then the proposals themselves are due to our finance department on March 31st. So one of the questions we get a lot as staff is how RFPs are evaluated once they come in. So these are the standard criteria that was approved by council quite some time ago. So we review both the qualifications of the firm's experience in providing the service to other municipalities. Cost is obviously a factor, unlike a bid where cost is the determining factor and it's let to the lowest responsible bidder. In an RFP, it is one factor. We also evaluate what the company's efforts towards sustainability are, whether or not this is a business in a disadvantaged area or owned by a woman or a veteran or a minority, as well as a local preference to businesses that are located within Sun Prairie. We have a standard evaluation committee for different RFPs or RFPs that are let. In this case, the evaluation committee will be an alderperson. It's always offered first to the chair of the committee, so we offered it to Alder Owens, who graciously accepted. And then we'll have our assistant city attorney, who's also serving as the interim HR director, myself, the police chief, the city assessor, and then one of our accountants, Mai Vane, who's also the one who took care of getting all of this posted. So we appreciate her getting this done for us. We selected this as a committee so we can make sure that there's a sound review of it from people who've experienced other health insurance models besides the one we have here. The majority of the employees on that list have worked for an employer that has self-insurance or had self-insurance at some point during their time there. And we thought that was important to ensure that it really could be given a fair shake and evaluated by people who had lived under that model. So the proposal requirements are very lengthy. We have kind of a standard set of specifications for all of our contracts. And then we also put out an appendix with each of those, which is kind of the meat and bones for that specific proposal. So we are requiring that they do a review of self-insurance and determine whether or not it would be appropriate for some or all of our benefits packages. As a reminder, the health insurance broker doesn't just help us select our medical insurance. They also assist with dental insurance selection, cafeteria Section 125 plan vendors, so for FSA or dependent care accounts. We also offer additional supplemental insurances that employees can purchase on their own, including things like pet insurance or supplemental accident insurance. And so they help us select all of those things. So even if self-insurance doesn't make sense for our health insurance, which it may or may not, we don't know yet, it may make sense for some of the other insurance coverages or benefits that we do offer. We also asked them to evaluate access to University of Wisconsin providers. There was some significant angst amongst our employees when we switched from SSM Dean to GHC because you have to establish care with new specialists during the transition, and it takes quite a bit of time to establish with a specialist and get that first initial appointment. So we wanted to evaluate, would they recommend that we only stick with plans that have those, or if we needed a transition care, what would they do so we could avoid delays in getting into C providers? We also asked them to review our employee clinic. Our employee clinic is a partnership with the Sun Prairie School District that's done with our legacy provider, SSM. So we asked them to evaluate whether or not that would be the most effective model for us, or if there's another alternate or some structure changes they might recommend. Assistant City Attorney / Interim HR Director Rose Simon Silva also asked for a flat fee proposal. Our current contract is a commission-based model, and neither Rose or I like that as an option for health insurance because they're not very transparent about what the commission or kickbacks are, and we don't think that's fair to our taxpayers when we're trying to expend public funds. So we often prefer a flat fee model where we know exactly what it costs per head or belly button on the plan. So we've asked them to disclose their flat fee proposal as well as what any kickbacks would be. We also asked that they review our benefits offerings, both to ensure that all the benefits we're currently offering make sense, and to look and see if there's benefits that perhaps we should be offering that our peers have that we're not currently offering that might be worth adding in there. These are some of the factors we're going to talk about as we evaluate self-insurance, because that would be a pretty significant change for us. So some pros of going to self-insurance are you avoid all the administrative fees, the kickbacks, or the commissions. Those can also be avoided through a flat-fee proposal. There's no built-in profit margin for insurance companies. Obviously, insurance companies exist to make money and not out of a benevolent interest in serving the public. So when you're self-insured, you don't have that extra profit margin built into your costs. If the city has good claims experience, which we have had recently, there's the potential to save significant money because you don't have to keep pouring into the reserves once you're at an actuarially reasonable amount. You also have some more flexibility in plan customization. Rather than purchasing a plan that's out there from one of the local benefits providers, you can add in different things or tweak coverage for different things as you see fit. Obviously, that has to be consistent with state statute. There's some coverages that must be offered and must be offered with certain levels of coverage. There's also a lot more transparency and data access, which is both a good and a bad thing, but it can be very nice to figure out, like, where is our big claims exposure? What's causing this? Is there a specific employee who should perhaps have a guidance conversation with HR or our third-party administrator about alternate methods of seeking care that would be effective but less expensive? And if we have a good claims experience here and there's unused funds that can be retained, there's always the potential to either do a premium holiday or have some sort of deductible reduction or like a one-time benefits contribution to a cafeteria for employees. Some of the concerns with going self-insured is for medical insurance, we'd be responsible for all of our own ERISA compliance if we didn't contract with a third-party administrator. So we would need to make sure that we're complying with all of the federal insurance requirements. We would no longer have an insurance company who's handling that for us. When there are large claims, we would bear the full responsibility. So rather than paying premiums into a pool and knowing that any medical cost claim is covered, we're going to be responsible for covering the cost of that claim. So if, for example, you have an employee whose child is in the neonatal intensive care unit, or you have an employee who's undergoing a long-term medical treatment for something like cancer, we're responsible for covering the full cost of that under a self-insured model. This can sometimes lead to budget volatility and uncertainty. Obviously, with health insurance, it's not as predictable as something like a capital improvement plan. You don't know 5 years down the road that you're going to have an employee who has a sick child or a family member with cancer. So you can't budget and predict for that in the same way that we can budget or predict for a lot of other things that occur. With these models, we would either need to contract with a third-party administrator and or add additional HR and finance staff, because we're going to be responsible for managing our own reserves, paying all of these bills, and essentially running our own insurance plan. We would also need to make sure we have appropriate stop-loss coverage and laser policies in place. Laser policies are something, in case you don't know, that's often implemented if you've got something on your plan that's got high claims experience. So say, for example, you've got an employee who's got a slow and destructive disease like Parkinson's or a slow-moving cancer. You're going to be required to purchase what's called a laser policy for that employee or their dependent to cover their upcoming health insurance expenses, because our stop-loss insurance is not going to be sufficient to cover those needs. So it's like a separate policy that you have to go out and purchase as an employer. There's always the risk that if you do have a catastrophic claim, like I mentioned before, you're on the hook for that, and that's obviously unbudgeted and could deplete your reserves. The actuaries recommend that you have between 25 to 33% of this year's claims experience set aside in a reserve fund. So for us, our claims experience average for the last couple of years is somewhere between 3 to 3.8 million. So that means on the high end, we'd have to have 1 million set aside in that reserve fund. And that obviously needs to be in that fund for health insurance purposes only. So that's not like our normal general fund balance or contingency funds where it could be accessed for other things. That's for health insurance. There's also always the risk that you have access to employee data that causes potential risk of discrimination. There have been communities out there and litigation out there where when you're under a self-insured model, you have an elder say, who's responsible for identifying health insurance costs? Maybe they shouldn't work here anymore. I think all of you are savvy enough to not say that, but all of you will not always be here forever. Eventually, you'll get tired of serving potentially. And so that's just a risk we have, because right now we don't have access to that information. You don't know who the high-cost employees on our plan are. Under this model, that access to information can be a little bit more out there, and even if council doesn't know it, staff does, and there's often inappropriate comments that are made, or our insurance wouldn't be so expensive if so-and-so didn't work here. So those are some of the factors we'll consider as we evaluate that. With all of our RFPs that go out there, we require our contractors, our vendors, to execute our standard approved contract. They always want to try to negotiate those. We generally say no, but if there is a negotiation that requires both legal and financial review to ensure the city's interests are still protected, In health insurance brokerage contracts specifically, we often have the proposers refuse to disclose their commissions or kickbacks. That's something that's not acceptable to us. If we're expending taxpayer funds, we need to know what you are getting on the other side in addition to what you're getting from us. And then any final contract that is done, whether it's our standard or there's some sort of negotiated alternative, will be approved by council. This is far outside staff's ability to approve and execute. So this would be something where staff would be bringing forward a recommendation from the evaluation committee to council for approval. So that's how that works if there's any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Do we have any questions, comments up here for Kathleen? Okay, we'll just move on then. Next on the agenda is consideration, discussion, and possible action on budget amendments for Kids for IMAX. And I believe Sandy is going, oh, thank you.
I'm here.
That was quick.
Yes.
And then after Sandy is done presenting, then Alder Owens would like to have the table or have the floor. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Council President Crombie. So at the last council meeting, Alder Baker made a referral regarding the purchase of the Kids for computers at the Media Center as outlined in the 2025 budget that was approved by the council. And so this report here, included in your packet, was a staff report, kind of breaking down the initial conversations we've had with staff since 2024 to where we are today. So I'll just provide a quick background on that information and kind of walk you through the process of what the conversations we've been having so far. So in 2024, staff began conversations on the replacement of the IMAX that we currently have at the Media Center. We've had them for several years now, and they are aging, and so it was time to replace them. We had discussions on what sort of model to move forward with, and at the time, we decided to move forward with a leasing model, which would allow us to spread the costs of the equipment over 5 years. So that was not executed last year due to two primary reasons, which were included in your packet. The first is the renovation of the Media Center. That was a part of the library renovation and expansion. And we felt that if we were to purchase and install this equipment, we would have to then uninstall it while the Media Center was displaced during the renovation. So we did not feel like that was an effective use of time to do that. Second, the Media Center has a lot of unique software and equipment, and we work closely with our IT department when we're making purchases, when we're working on equipment, and so we were also we were trying to coordinate with our IT director, Don McDermott, who's here, to ensure that he has capacity to work with us for the installation. So because of those two reasons, we delayed the procurement of these IMAX to spring of this year, which leads us to where we're at. So in January, staff had started to have conversations on what it would look like to purchase these IMAX. In the process, we learned that moving forward with a leasing model for the IMAX, that was no longer a viable option. So the two options we identified with our IT department were to, if we want to stay within the budget we have, which is $3,500 annually, we would be able to move forward with Dell PCs. Apple iMacs are the industry standard, and so staff expressed a desire to remain with the Apple iMacs. The challenge with that is it requires us to purchase the equipment up front. We cannot lease or we cannot spread that cost over 5 years like we can with the PCs. And so what we have proposed tonight is a budget amendment for $12,152 from the Media Center fund balance. We would use that in addition with the $3,500 we do have budgeted to purchase the 8 iMacs. At the same time, we did submit a request to the Friends of the Media Center last month to help cover the costs for these machines. So they have not met in the last 2 months, but our request is outstanding with them. And so we are hopeful that if we move forward with a budget amendment and purchasing the equipment, that there could still be an opportunity for reimbursement from the Friends of the Media Center. So Don is here in the audience, and we do have John in the AV room as well from the Media Center. So happy to answer any questions after your comments, Alder Owens.
Okay, Alder Owens.
Thank you. I do serve
Thank you, Sandy.
on the Media Center Commission as the council representative. And when I became aware of this situation, it baffled me that a request had been made to the Friends and the Friends didn't even meet. So then the question became, then how do we fix this? And based on my library experience, the library maintains or has maintained in the past a fund balance. And because of the way the library financing works, we were able to retain a finance balance and then present a plan to the finance department on how we were going to use it. So I was very familiar with using fund balance to take care of one-time cost. So that was a suggestion I made to staff. Could we do that? And we decided that because of the timing, the best route to go would be to come here to COW and then council first, because the Media Center Commission isn't meeting till Thursday of this week, which would push it back even further because we're not meeting in the first meeting in April. Then you're looking at the end of April, which means basically we would have run out of time. And I think to everyone, especially the commission, the Kids 4 program is very important. The equipment that we have now is completely outdated, and we need to be able to provide the kind of equipment that kids are going to learn to use. So I would encourage everyone to approve this amendment, and I will make the motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Now, tonight's vote, when it goes to council, it's going to need 6 votes, correct?
That's correct.
For a budget
President.
amendment?
Yep, for a budget amendment.
Yeah, because I know we've got,
Even with change in the makeup of the body, it's still 6 votes.
okay. So Alder Jacobs.
I just want to, can you explain that to me, please? Why it would require a unanimous vote?
It's 6 votes, not unanimous.
But
Oh,
we only have,
missing one.
yeah, we're missing Alder Baker.
That's true. I hadn't even thought about that.
So that's everybody.
Yeah,
Votes
Yeah.
still.
right.
I believe it's still 6 votes. I will confirm that before council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Alder Comstock.
Yeah, I've got a question on the delay. I know you've stated in here there are a couple of reasons for that. In my understanding, if I've got the dates correct, back in 2024, Macs were identified as the industry standard at that point, and that's what they wanted to be replaced with. And along through here, IT came back with, we'd rather have Windows computers because we don't have the staff to support Macs. We only have one person who knows how to manage that. I hope I don't have that correct. Did that happen?
So if we are looking to stay within our allotted budget amount, which is the $3,500 we have annually, that option would be the PCs.
Okay. Even though the end users had already said this is the industry standard. Is that right? I'm wondering how there's such a delay here. I'm wondering what the impact on the cost was because of the delay.
Sure. So the quoted cost in 2024 was between that 12,000 to 17,000 range, and we're coming in at right now 15,652. So it is still within that range.
Okay. So that's one question I have. The concern I have is that when an end user identifies what the industry standard is, why would not an end user come back and say, we'd rather do this? And in fact, wouldn't the PCs with the software that you needed be more expensive in the long run?
So the quote for the PCs is, what we can afford, I guess, right? So while we, the original vision was to use that $3,500 to purchase or to lease the iMacs. Since that option is no longer available to us, we looked at other options. And so the options are PCs to stay within
due to length of time and, our interest in actually getting down to business, everyone tonight will get 2 minutes. One other thing I do want to point out, and I have no recommendation on this because, again, these are your rules to consider, is that there are some communities that choose to limit their public input to residents, property owners, and business owners within the community. So the theory there is that you won't have some random person from another community that has no ties to Sun Prairie showing up and speaking at public input. I know we've seen that a few times where we've been discussing an item, and I think the last one I remember is the ALPR cameras, where we had people from other communities coming in saying, hey, I don't support these, I don't like these, I spoke against them in my community, and I'm here speaking against them as well. Again, this is totally up to you as a body what you want to do. I always encourage that if you do a limitation, you kind of have it to this broader group, because you never want to disenfranchise renters who are also a member of your community. Or oftentimes there's business owners who don't own their property and they rent where they have their business located, but they're very invested in our community. They're operating a business and employing people here. So this allows you the ability to make sure that anyone who is a property owner or who lives within the city or who's got business ties to the city would speak. And you can choose to still have public input as a free-for-all. I know the school district has got some tighter limitations on it even than these. I'm just throwing these out there as an option you can consider. So again, there's no recommendation. These are your rules for how you run your meetings. One other thing that I think could be an issue for discussion is referrals. So under the current rules, referrals are intended to be used for a matter of citywide importance. So the example I always give on this is if you have someone on your street who is either thrilled with their snow plowing and wants to express a compliment to Public Works or frustrated with their plowing, you wouldn't necessarily say, hey, I'm doing a referral to the city engineer for plowing at 300 East Main Street. That's not a matter of citywide importance. That's one resident reaching out to you with a concern. And those are usually best and quickest addressed by just reaching out to the engineer and saying, hey, I had a constituent contact. Can you help me understand what happened here? So that's how our referrals are intended to be used. So you would do a referral, for example, to talk about the status of our health insurance RFP, or you could do a referral to have staff explore our stormwater pond maintenance techniques, or something that is going to affect the whole city and everyone who's here. But you wouldn't necessarily do it for like one individual constituent concern or just because you have a question for a staff member. So the question is, do you wish to keep referrals at all as an agenda item? They're not obligated to be an agenda item. It's been a very long-standing practice here, but it's actually not even written into our ordinance. It's just something we've done. And if you do keep referrals, do you want to require a second on the referral so that if a referral is made by one alder, another alder would need to second it before staff are required to act and report back? So these are, again, just factors for you to consider. I don't have a recommendation either way, but these are some options that are out there for you. You've also got your code of conduct. So these are rules that you enacted that govern how council interacts with each other, with staff, with the public, and with local community organizations. I would recommend that we do a revision of these to reflect our current organizational structure. Right now, we've got references into the rules that were adopted in April with the organizational structure that we had last April. There have been some changes since then, and I would recommend we update it to reflect those job titles in that new arrangement. We also had alders request the opportunity to review language on public criticism of staff. Right now, the code of conduct indicates that concerns with staff should be brought first to staff's attention, then to the staff supervisor. If you're unsatisfied with that, to the administrator. But the theory is if you didn't like your interaction with an employee at Parks, you would not call them out by name and say, hey, I'm very unhappy with the interaction I had with Jose today. I'd like to address this. You would reach out to the Parks and Forestry director and say, hey, something weird happened. How do we address this? We had some elders indicate that they would like to have the ability to publicly criticize staff, which the rules don't currently allow for. And we did also have an elder request clarity on how to address performance issues in the administrator, because most staff issues are to be brought to the administrator if you're not satisfied with the manager. Obviously, as a reminder, in that circumstance, you would bring it to the mayor or council president's attention. So I'm just reminding all of you of that. And then if you want to include that language specifically in the rules, that's also certainly something you could consider. So that concludes my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, Alder Rosas has a question.
Kathleen, if you go back, you mentioned about having some time limits for public speaking. I noticed that we don't have that here. You know, it could be 1 minute, it could be 5 minutes, but they don't know that. I believe that it's up to the chair to say you have 2 or 3 minutes. And if they want to continue, any alder can say, I make a motion to extend that. Is that correct?
That is correct. So absent something specific being written into our rules that states you've got 2 minutes or 5 minutes, it's up to the chair to determine the length. And then if the body wishes to extend, so if you're hearing from someone and you're like, this is amazing, I want to hear the rest. If the chair calls it and says, hey, you've hit your time limit, you're free as council to say, no, I'd like to extend the time limit for this speaker.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen.
I'm sorry,
Let's see.
I just want a clarification. So any one council person can say, I want to hear Cora speak more, and Cora gets to speak more.
There would be a vote by the body
There
on
would be
whether
a
or not you
vote.
wanted to extend the time for that person. So it's almost like
that's
voting
kind of
to
funny because
suspend
the vote would
rules.
probably take longer than the person was going to speak, but that's fine.
Generally, yes, but oftentimes this will come up if you're doing, for example, public comment on a development that's controversial, and you're hearing from the next door neighbor of the property who's like, hey, I'm very concerned about how this will impact my property values, my stormwater runoff, whatever. You may not wish to cut that individual off. But if you have also heard from 17 different speakers who are just like, I don't like hotels, big box stores, apartments, etc., you may at that point say like, okay, I don't need everyone to list the 15 reasons they don't like hotels. We've heard that. So it's really up to you as a body. What I would just encourage you to do is if you're going to have a standard at a meeting, make sure it is announced and it is consistent. I know most of the time meetings are like tonight and we only have a smattering of public speakers, but you do want to make sure that we're being consistent so that an individual resident can't come forward and say, hey, you placed a speech restriction on me and only me.
Mayor Stocker wants to say something.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I feel it might be necessary, not so much to defend my consent agenda request, but maybe to explain it and explain it to the council and the vast listening audience. Yeah, in the past, what we've done is the consent agenda has included a number of items. And again, I can see that for efficiency, but I can also see that for full transparency, I felt it necessary that we parse those out to the appropriate committees. That way, people in the audience can see and actually hear what we're voting on rather than have everything dumped into one vote. So that's the reason, and it's for full transparency for no other reason. I think it's important that our public hears that. So.
Yep, no, I completely understand your position, Mary. You articulated it very well to us as staff. I do just feel obligated to remind council it's ultimately their decision what their rules are. Obviously, I'm sure that they will hear you out as the mayor. And I think one other factor to consider is we did start adding summaries of many of the agenda items to it so that if someone's not clear, obviously the minutes don't necessarily need a summary saying these are the minutes from last month's meeting. But if we have, for example, a liquor license on here, we've now added that little paragraph underneath in italics that says this is a change of agent in the license from Susie to Bob. So that way residents know, like, why is this coming forward? What's happening here? So again, this is totally up to your discretion as council.
Okay, Alder Jacobs.
So Kathleen, I'm looking over the 2025 Code of Conduct. I have a question. I'm sorry, just to plop this on you right now. On page 7, under unofficial settings, so the very last sentence of that says overt or implicit promises of specific council action or inaction must be avoided. And I don't feel that that language is strong enough because as you know, not one person can make any guarantees to anyone about how council will act. And I wonder if there are potential legal implications of someone hearing that message and acting in a certain way because they got that message from someone who is in an official capacity with the city. I'm wondering if we might not make that stronger language. Because I can tell you there's been many times where I've told people, oh no, that's just one vote. That person can't guarantee you that's going to happen.
No, I think that's a very good point, Alder Jacobs. I know this is a conversation we often have with staff, that simply because one alder has stated something to you does not necessarily make it so. So whether that be one alder coming forward and saying, you're going to get fired, I don't like you, or one alder coming forward and saying, I will never, ever let them fire you. Your job will always be protected. An individual alder does not have the power to make that promise by themselves because those are ultimately decisions to be made either by the employee supervisor, the administrator as chief personnel officer, or for those of us who serve at your pleasure by you as a body. And so it sometimes is a struggle because we'll have employees come forward and say like, well, Alder so-and-so told me they were going to support this. Yes, they did. And they did support it. And they advocated for it zealously on the floor. And there was a 7-1 vote that said, we're not doing that. And there's oftentimes kind of a dissonance between employees, especially employees who don't interact with you as regularly as those of us at this table do, where they're like, but I was told it was going to get support. And it's like, well, you did get support from one individual alder. The issue really is that you didn't get support from the body as a whole. And as a reminder, as alders, you are all very important and we love all of you equally. But any of you don't have the independent ability to promise something. Aaron always reminds us that we love all of our elders, past, present, and future equally. So I did just want to remind all of you of that. But yeah, I think there's the potential that we could tighten up this language that elders cannot make promises to employees about how council will act or to other members of the community. Because that's the other situation we've run into is, we've had an alder say, for example, like, I will ensure that there's a stop sign installed at this intersection. And then you review it as a body and say, like, nope, that makes no sense for a stop sign. It should be a roundabout, a stoplight. It doesn't need anything. And then they come forward, and sometimes they've even threatened to sue the city because their elder person promised them they could have this. And it is always your job to hear from your constituents and review their concerns, but you are not obligated to support every constituent's thoughts on everything, because that would place you in an impossible position where you'd have one constituent saying, I want you to completely legalize pot, and another one saying, I want you to crack down on drugs. You cannot do both of those things at the same time. That just doesn't work. But it's not your place to promise as one individual elder that I will ensure council adopts this, because you can't, and you never know how other elders are going to vote. Even if you have an inkling, something could come up, someone could come give a very eloquent public comment that might change your mind. So I think that's definitely a language we can propose tightening up when we bring this back in April.
Thank you.